I guess just call me Brando Sando Jr. because I wrote another book in secret, sort of. Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Katie and today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a reflection on a book I wrote while I was on hiatus from YouTube. I wasn't actually going to make this video for a multitude of reasons, but I was going through my subfeed and I saw that Chris MF had made a similar video. And I decided I have way too many thoughts about this project and this experience to just keep inside of my head. And as a writing community, I feel like it's important to share the things we go through with each other. So welcome to my reflection on the fourth book I've written by accident. So let's just start our story at the very beginning. This book was born at 4 a.m. by accident, and it had been a brainworm of mine for a really long time. Essentially, it's a well-known fact about me, if you've seen a lot of my videos, that I like the soulmate trope. I kind of talk about it sporadically and very much in Easter eggs of videos. It is really popular on Tumblr and in fan fiction, and there's about 1,000 different ways that a soulmate trope can manifest. However, I am personally only interested in writing this trope when it's complicated. Because oh no, why would love ever be easy? My writing of the soulmate trope began last April after I finished my rewrite of The Wrath King. So I started working on this fanfiction idea that was revolved around the soulmate trope and a specific show that I was really loving at the time. And it was a super nice cleanser for my brain after that, and I realized I really liked working with the soulmate trope. And so I have had experience with it. However, at 4 a.m. on January 30th, the soulmate trope grew wings and attached itself to another idea that I'd had for a while. It was the very end of JanuaryMo. I had about 5K left to get to actually win JanuaryMo. But I realized that the witch book was literally falling apart at the seams and I could no longer write it and feel any progress with it. All the words I feel like I was pulling out of my teeth were just wasted words at that point. So I decided I'm gonna write something fun, something indulgent. All the pieces fell together with a first line that I wrote that then spiraled from there. It starts, as most vile things do, on Twitter. And somehow in less than 48 hours, I had written 9,000 words for this story. At first I felt really guilty for working on this project because I was supposed to be writing 5K in the witch book to reach 50K for a JanuaryMo witch book project, but instead I was writing a completely different story. Luckily, a lot of my friends were like, just count those words as JanuaryMo words and say you won. And I did, because you know what? I was writing a story. I was writing again where I had stalled after a week of just realizing the witch book wasn't quite right and wasn't correct and I need to go back to a significant drawing board to figure out what was wrong with it. And, you know, I was writing this different story and I genuinely thought it was going to be 34,000 words, similar to the original novella Soulmate AU I had written in April. And then something wild happened. I had planned a live for January 31st as a celebration to the end of JanuaryMo, and if I wasn't done, I was going to run a couple of sprints just to help people reach their goal for JanuaryMo, but I wrote 9,000 words in 48 hours, so that wasn't necessary. And basically, to celebrate hitting JanuaryMo, I got really drunk, talked way too much about my secret project, which I mentioned, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess fortunately, and then people asked me to read part of it. And I did because I was drunk. This live has since been privated because there's a lot of shit in it that just, if you weren't there, you know, you weren't there. And there's a lot of stuff that happened on that live. I may have created a erotica Discord, but that's neither here nor there. To give you just an idea of the secret project, I'm gonna give you a blurb. This is what the secret project essentially is. With a single touch, the name on your wrist could turn from silver to black. You brush against someone on the subway and return home to find that your soulmate's name is now inky black. An unlucky coincidence. You shake your boss's hand and realize at your desk that the name is now black. Fortune favors the bold. But what about when it comes to sports? When rivalry and jealousy and intense feelings threaten the pure cosmically designed love, all that can come is drama. So yeah, it's a soulmate AU, rivals to lovers, contemporary romance. And did I mention it's also fan fiction? A lot of things that have happened with this book that were kind of just by accident. Essentially, despite how small this fandom is, it got a surprising amount of attention. It's not heat waves level, but I genuinely didn't think I was going to garner any interest at all. Not even for people who might have been looking for this pairing, let alone people from my real life. And yet, saying it blew up seems a bit of an overstatement, but we'll return to that. I have spent the last year and a half wondering if I'm cut out for publishing. I fall into slumps more easily now, and I've put a lot of pressure on myself to write a story that I can query. Unfortunately, I've also realized that just a lot of my story ideas are unconventional. I don't think they're super marketable because they don't have significant comp titles. Comps is an entire can of worms that I can open up at a later date because it's a little too big for this specific video. So let's just go with the fact that my books are really not like any other books, at least that I have read, that I have come across, that I have searched for, because I spend many hours searching for comp titles. Many hours. And part of the problem is, and if you're a writer, you know this, is that it takes so much time and so much effort and so much energy, so much love in order to craft a book. Oh, thank God, to have it strangled by feeling like no one will ever want to buy it. And I mean buy in the sense of like a publisher would want to buy it and pay me money for it, and not necessarily a consumer buying it, because I'm nowhere near that. Plus publishing kind of pulls strings to market books effectively in ways that I couldn't. The idea that publishing might not want to take a chance on your work just because it isn't something that they've seen before, that they know will sell because you're a debut. Like, publishing has to take a chance on you and your work, and they have to feel confident that they're going to make a profit off of you, because at the end of the day, this is a business, and they have to feel confident that they could market your book in order for people to buy it who might not normally buy it. And I get all of that. I do. I really do. But at the same time, writing is such a solitary process. Oftentimes it doesn't have this dialogue between writer and reader that fan fiction can provide. We've now come full circle. So as I was writing the story and as I was posting it, I realized I was having a lot more fun writing it because it was well received. I was motivated and inspired by the love that I was receiving in the comments. The external validation is immediate and addicting and was super surprising. Like, when I wrote the fan fiction that I wrote in April, I got a lot of engagement on it simply because it's a really popular fandom. But with this story, I think I was more surprised, because with the other story, I don't want to say expected a lot of engagement, but I knew it was possible that there was going to be a lot of engagement. And the fact that this story got a lot of engagement when I wasn't expecting it means that it was a great surprise and great joy to me. And I mean, it is so fucking wild that people I don't even know are writing thesis papers in my comments about my stupid, silly little story. They're telling me their favorite lines and they're analyzing my choices. And someone even commented an entire playlist that they had made for my story and giving me a reason behind why they picked each song as it related to the story I was telling. Like, what? What? Like, I think about it and I am shocked. I'm shocked, genuinely. I'm really not trying to say all of this to brag. My point is that for the 55 days that I was writing this book, it was extremely validating and it was extremely exciting. And that was something that I personally did really need when it came to writing. I really haven't had this much fun since I started rewriting The Wrath King back in March of last year, because that was just such an exciting prospect of breathing new life into the story where there previously had been none. I think a lot of us writers say we want to be published so people will read our stories. And that's definitely true for myself. I've fantasized more times than I can count about people having read my stories and engaged with them in this way and love them like I love them. But it's such a long and hard and tedious road to get there. And for a moment, I had some of it. I had a taste of it. So I wonder to myself, am I cut out for publishing? For the hard days that are required when it comes to being traditionally published, I don't know. I don't know, honestly. I flip-flop back and forth on the answer because I know I have the capacity to tough it out, to go this hard road to being traditionally published. I know I can stick it out. I really can. But will that pursuit only make me unhappy and eventually hate writing? Will I burn out on the worry that I will spend so much time writing the book of my heart and working so hard on it only to have it be rejected and put on a shelf to collect dust? What if that makes me unable to write even silly things that have no pressure attached to them? I don't know. I really don't have an answer, but that is something I've been thinking about and considering for myself and my own journey. Let's pivot to a slightly different topic and talk about AuthorTube and what role that has in the creation of the fourth book that I've written. I hit a slump with making YouTube videos around the same time that I hit a slump with writing the witch book. At the end of January, I hadn't yet made the conscious decision to go on hiatus. I ended up not posting a video for 50 days. Which, when I say that out loud, it's wild. Oops. Anyway, the point is I started writing The Secret Project on January 30th and I completed it on March 24th. So a very large portion of the time that I spent away from creating YouTube videos was spent writing. And I ended up writing 109,000 words, roughly, for the entire draft. And about 85K of that was spent away from YouTube. I know this because I have a spreadsheet and it's wild. I'm glad I've kept track of how much I've written. So when you look at it that way, when you frame it like that, it does make me wonder if YouTube hinders my writing. And this is definitely not a new conversation. I am not the first voice to speak on this. In fact, so many people have brought this up, and many people have taken hiatuses from YouTube to explore this. For me personally, the hiatus started out unplanned. It basically began with a series of failed videos that I couldn't publish, and I wasn't going to publish on time, so I was like, oh, I'll just go to the next week. And I've skipped weeks before and it's been fine. However, it became intentional because I had this project to work on. And so on February 10th, I posted about my anti-VEDIF because I also realized that since there are so many failed videos, I really needed to focus on myself and see what kind of content I wanted to bring to this platform and bring to you and bring to the community, and really figure out what kind of content was going to make me happy. I know, it's really boring to hear YouTubers talk about YouTube in such a meta way, but I do think my hiatus and sudden writing burst were less about the fact that making videos was taking up too much of my time, and more that I had an idea I was passionate about and then I could just binge write. I am very hyper-focused, and obviously a workaholic. So having YouTube is good for me because it is another creative outlet that I can pour myself into so I don't burn out on writing. Essentially, I decided I was taking the hiatus because I was having a lot of feelings and I didn't want to bombard you all with all of my inarticulate emotions about how I was struggling, because I have done that a lot on my channel, and to be honest, it does get really depressing after a while. And genuinely, that is no shade to any creator who does this. I really appreciate the kind of vulnerable honesty that we have cultivated on this platform. It is really important to have honesty when it comes to the writing journey, but it is also really hard as a creator to edit yourself in such a shitty place mentally all the time. And so it's really about me and how I was feeling about it, and not about actually bringing you honest content. It was a choice that I wanted to make to try to figure out myself without having the pressure of the camera. But if you are struggling with your writing or struggling with content creation, I have a few videos that I'll link down below where I show a bit more of my struggle, and if you want a video to empathize with, you can go watch those. And moving forward, I won't cut all of my struggles, of course, but I feel like it is important to have a balance. You know, I mean, this is a nuanced conversation and y'all understand, I would hope. So I didn't vlog any of this process. I vlogged 0 of it. And I thought about it a couple of times when I had 10K days, especially when I wrote 50K in 2 weeks. Like, that would be great clickable content, right? I know Wallace is gonna scream in the comments like, you should have done it, bitch. I'm just kidding. She understands. But the thing is, it was way more important for me to keep this project close to myself and to those who had found it. There's a certain feeling of freedom that comes with not having to perform on camera. Regardless of how we talk about authenticity and honesty when it comes to being on a social platform, there is always going to be a sort of mask or sort of layer that separates me from you, because I have edited this content and I have given you a edited version of myself. Not saying that that version of myself isn't real, but it is different than who I am with my very close friends behind the scenes when we're sending about 50 billion voice messages back and forth to each other at 12 o'clock at night. There is a similar pressure when it comes to talking about your projects on AuthorTube, and creating content about your content can get a little bit tough. And I know this is rich coming from me because I overshare all the goddamn time. I mean, for fuck's sakes, I couldn't do a live without reading my own secret project that I was trying to keep secret. Like, I am a hypocrite for saying that. But I will admit, I was also worried about the fact that this story is also very different than every other story I've talked about on here. So I didn't know really how to broach the subject of the secret project while I was working on it. And I didn't want to like garner unwanted attention about it and have to perform about it. It's a story from my heart, you know? It was very fun, but also a very interesting experiment. That segues very nicely into a discussion about contemporary versus fantasy. And the fact that I get to now talk about how I am a liar. Big fat liar. Because if you know me at all, if you've watched my videos, you know that I write fantasy. I write almost exclusively fantasy. All the other books that I've written have been fantasy. All my other ideas are fantasy. But for some reason, apparently a contemporary romance was what my brain needed. What I find really hysterical is that I have only ever had one contemporary romance idea, and that was back in high school, and I didn't pan out because I was in high school and I hadn't finished a book until 2020. So it genuinely never got off the ground, and I'm still interested in exploring that idea, but it was always shuffled so far back on the list of ideas that I was interested in that I have never even talked about it or touched it since. And since that idea, there's been nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which is why I think I said I would never write a contemporary romance, because if you have no ideas for a contemporary romance, you never think you're gonna write it, right? Like, someone who writes contemporary romance who just doesn't read or think about fantasy isn't gonna be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna write a fantasy book, unless they're like, you know, someone who reads a lot of it. Like, I just don't read or write or consider contemporary romance, except in like rom-coms. It turns out I'm the fool though, because here I am, I wrote a fucking contemporary romance book. Granted, there is a speculative element, but it is still contemporary romance all the same. So what I find really funny now, though, is that I'm super excited to work on a fantasy idea. And I wonder if my newfound excitement for writing a fantasy idea comes from the fact that I was burnt out on fantasy before, and now I've written a contemporary romance to kind of cleanse the brain. Because let's be honest, it's really hard to write fantasy. There are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of mental work is required, and while it is a ton of fun, it really does take a really large toll on your creative well. And unfortunately, despite being able to bang out fantasy idea after fantasy idea, I am unable to work on multiple projects at the same time, which that is the reason why the Bowl of Fate failed so spectacularly. I tried, I really did. But now I wonder if I could work on a fantasy and a contemporary because they're so vastly different from each other. Here's the thing, writing a book is hard no matter what genre it is. But I will say, as someone who has now written a contemporary romance and has written fantasy books, writing contemporary romance and writing by the modern rules of the world is infinitely easier for me. I mean, I get to use words that I've never even thought about using in a fantasy setting, like athleisure and schmooze. Like, so much fun. Like, that's so fun. What? So much fun. And writing a romance, specifically a sports romance, includes a lot of travel. So I get to write a lot of places, and I get to research real places, and I don't have to think of them myself, and I don't have to think about architectural things myself. I get to write about fun tropes as well. I get to write about galas and tiny towns and going to the beach, and I get to write about parties and card games and strip poker and massages and so much stuff. I have so much more leeway within a contemporary romance to dive into cute, fun things. And I actually get to go in depth with the emotions of the characters and how each of the plot points affects them, because I don't have to build a world around them. I get to strip everything back because I know the reader will understand what I'm talking about because it's the world we inhabit. There aren't a ton of strings to pull. You know, I don't have to focus on politics or warfare or class divides or religion issues. In this specific story, I will say there obviously is a shit ton of contemporary that deals with all of those things. But for me personally, in this story, I didn't have to deal with any of it. I love all those things. Those things are what gets me excited about fantasy and writing in general. I love writing about complicated issues. But for this story specifically, they did need to be there. And I could really focus on the characters and writing these characters and studying who they are and how their upbringing has affected them and how it then affects their relationship to each other. And as well as that, I get to focus on the fun, indulgent things that I don't get to usually put in fantasy. I will admit though, I do have a very large cast of side characters because I'm a sucker for those and I will never let them go. So that didn't change. All in all, I've come to realize that I really like writing contemporary romance too. As long as there's sort of a speculative element and as long as I have an idea. I don't think I've ever stated that the reason I didn't want to write contemporary romance is because I'm not interested in writing about our world. I think it's more that I just didn't have any ideas that thrilled me and enthralled me and excited me in the way that my fantasy ideas have. But this, with the speculative element of fantasy soulmate AU, it came together in a very organic way. And of course, the speculative element of soulmates is more of like a plot hindrance and more of a plot device in order to get the two enemies or rivals to actually interact, and it makes sense for them to interact because the only reason that they even consider being with each other or even working on a relationship is because of the fact that they are soulmates. I'm not interested in writing just a random rivals to lovers thing without the added interrogation of how we look at love and how we view soulmates, because even though soulmates in the way that I have written it in this book are fantastical in the way that you have a name on your wrist, there's a lot of people within the world who believe in soulmates. I think it's a concept that goes all the way back to the Greeks. So this is a very ancient idea that can be explored within fantastical elements within a contemporary world, and I think still makes sense. So, you've now made it this far. Those were a lot of the thoughts that I have for this book, AuthorTube, and myself as on a writing journey. I guess I'll tell you about my Camp NaNo plans, because that was technically what today's video was supposed to be, but I was like, I can't talk about Camp NaNo without giving the context of Secret Project 1. And it turns out my planning video I made in January, the last video I made before I went on hiatus, became completely obsolete because the Secret Project came in and Miley Cyrus wrecking balled it to absolute shreds, absolute pieces. And as always, I have so many ideas and so many projects planned that I've been trying to figure out. Obviously, Secret Project 1, which I guess I can tell you is called Cruel Summer, name pending. Yes, it is based off the Taylor Swift song. That song basically ruled the entirety of the book. It's the theme song. But there is an entire cast of characters that I did mention, and there are two more ideas that have been percolating in my mind since I got about halfway through with writing Secret Project 1, Cruel Summer, and I think I am gonna write a second one in April. So this is Secret Project 2 Electric Boogaloo, or I guess we could call it Invisible String because that's the Taylor Swift song that describes this book, also Cardigan, but yeah, this book's gonna be painful. So it's a sequel in the sense that it is set in the same world. The couple that is in it shows up quite a bit within the first book, but it can still stand alone on its own. You'll still see the couple from the first book because one half of the couple in the first book is best friends with one half of the couple in the second book. Second book's couple, it revolves around the best friend. And it's turning into kind of a character study. I've written more in character profiles than I have in outline. And yes, I actually did outline this one. I have developed this project so much more than I did with Cruel Summer. The outline for Cruel Summer was 78 words. So yeah, 78. 78 is how many words it was. It was vibes. It was vibes and vibes alone. And I got 109K out of it. It's gonna need some serious structural editing, but we're fine. And honestly, I'm just gonna roll with this story momentum that I have built for Invisible Strings, Secret Project 2, Electric Boogaloo, and let Secret Project 1 rest for a month before I go back and start editing it in May. However, I do want to return to Be Gay Solve Crime. I think I've decided that that's another book I want to be working on next. Because as much as I would like to outline and brainstorm a new idea, I am really itching to revise this one. So when I'm not writing Secret Project 2, Electric Boogaloo, Invisible String, I'm going to be working on a revision plan for Be Gay Solve Crime, Drink Blood. I'm going to be working on a timeline, talking with my lovely critique partners about it, and basically coming up with a plan to tackle the revision of it because that book is a hot mess. We're cutting an entire POV, so it's a lot of work to be done. So Camp NaNo April is very much going to be a dual month, and the main focus is going to be drafting, but when I'm not drafting, I'm going to be working on the revision plan for Be Gay Solve Crime, Drink Blood, and that is going to be in the back of my brain as I work on writing. And if you didn't know, Be Gay Solve Crime, Drink Blood is my self-indulgent vampire novel. Turns out I just love self-indulgent projects. So those are all the thoughts that I have from my hiatus and about my writing journey thus far. You know, things are switching up a little bit. That's kind of the nature of things. Let me know how you're doing with your writing journey, and thank you so much for listening to this long monologue. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!